Okay, so here we are. Let's see. Here we are. I'm still organizing myself here. So here we are. This is our latest installment for reading from Parinama Method. This is verbal abuse and bullying. We're in the fifth hub, which is expression and communication, and we're talking about the factors that impact the development and expression of this hub. And it's kind of funny because this hub is about auditory and the impact of it, and even taking note of that. And and also, as if you've been following along, the boundary of auditory. And just one thing, just a callback, um is about how loud noise actually vibrationally is invasive. Like, you actually, shakes your body. So if it's unwelcome, it's actually kind of like something that needs to be processed and discharged. But yeah, I mean, because one of the things, so I'm gonna get into reading, please, please, I'm getting into the reading. But um so someone in my building drives a McLaren, or they just got one because it's the first time I'd seen it in the garage. And it's like, when they turn it on, it's really funny because it's a, you know car of affluence, but it's so, the sound of it reminds me of when I was driving my old Volvo, and the muffler fell off, and the sound of driving that, until I could, and then I, jerry-rigged, the muffler with, a wire hanger, and was, trying to do all this stuff to try to make it spend less than $15 to make it functional. And so it's funny to me, it's like the loudness of, lacking a muffler, that, to me, there's such a strong similarity between that and, kind of the exact opposite of the spectrum in terms of finances. 'Cause it really is, it's like, yeah, I don't know, it's funny. I mean, no shade, I actually have kind of a funny thing where I don't have any, I kinda like the silliness of that kind of ostentatious stuff. There's kind of an itch that, international ostentatious wealth scratches in its absurdity, that for whatever reason I just, really enjoy, without, very unapologetically. I mean, in my neighborhood, for example, okay, I'll get into this just for a second, and then we'll get back to the very not lighthearted concept of this interruption and stressor of verbal abuse and bullying. But um, in my neighborhood, someone had crashed a Bentley and abandoned it. And they never, I mean, at least the last time I checked, they never figured out who it was. And it was kind of this thing that's like, oh, that must be some, d but that kind of thing. I love, there's something about that, and I realize it's, kind of notionally offensive, when paired against the fact there are people who don't have their basic needs met. So I recognize that, but just as the notion, and oh my God, there's one more story. This is burning a hole. I have to just say it, is that, so I used to work sort of in a business that was kind of was it tangential, or whatever. We worked with commercial real estate, and I remember I was talking with this one, I was having this meeting, and I was talking about what we were doing. And I remember they were like, "Yeah, I don't think you need to worry about certain aspects of this." I'm not gonna get into the details of it. They're like, "Yeah, I don't know if that's gonna be the concern you're gonna have," because it had something to do with financial aspect of what we were doing, as being a benefit to people, would be that, we're developing a technology that had was financially beneficial, relative to the incumbent. And I remember they were like, "Have you seen," and they said, "Have you seen the garage?" And said, and And so, like, we went down to the garage, and the thing was, this was like a building. I don't wanna tell too much about it, like, but it was a building that had a lot of young, like, the children of really, like, wealthy international students there in Boston, and it was like, sort of like the car show of, like, like Lamborghinis and stuff like that, and there's just something about that, that it's like the lunacy of it, that it's like a 22-year-old kid who has, like, I don't know, that I just there's, like, kind of just a delight in it. It's so absurd. And when I was talking to the this is actually getting somewhere sort of ridiculous. I don't even know if the story is true, so keep in mind. Um, but so I was talking with the person, like, I don't know if it's like the building operator person, like the main, like the person that's in charge of like the guts of the building, like the wiring and stuff. And not that obviously that I was, just party to the conversation, and there were engineers there to look at some of the execution stuff. But I remember I was like, "Hey, listen, you've probably got some great stories, right, about this population living here?" And he's like, "I do." So there's so I was like, "All right, let's hear it." And the story that he told that stayed with me forever was that there was a kid, that, like, son of a oligarch who had this like, who, had an apartment. And like, one of the things that was really interesting was just that they're international and they just don't care. Like they move out and they just don't move any of their stuff. They just don't care. And so they leave all the furniture and, like, pretty much everything, and so it's kinda like so, and that's kinda like a fun notion, like, of, sort of found treasure. And, and this story was that this guy had free range hamsters in his apartment, and this kid, and it's, like, probably early 20s, mid 20, whatever, you get the idea. He'd had free range hamsters, and instead of wood chips, the guy had used currency. Like, he'd used, like, high dollar value bills. So the hamsters, so when he came in, it was like there was all this currency that had just been, like, shit and pissed on, he was like, it was like, kind of a lot of money, but it was a biohazard, so it needed to be, like, destroyed. And I'll tell you, I don't know if that story is true, but I love it. So true or false, I am it's just been something, the kind of it's this kind of thing, it's like that same kind of delight in the absolute absurdity of it. Um It's absurdity, and also, like, honestly, like, it's also sad. Like, the thing is that I think there's one thing about, like, these kids tend to be, like, there's a lot that's stolen from kids or taken from kids who are given, like, it's almost like a misdirection for them, where they get really, um yeah, I'm actually not gonna talk about that here. It's not really important for this, but yeah, so, I mean, like, the thing of, like, the like, it's just funny, and it's, whatever, it's like life has all sorts of nuance to it. So, anyway, so I'm gonna read here. That was a little, sort of intermission or whatever, pre-mission. Um, I'm gonna read here. So we're in the interruptions and stressors, and, yeah, I mean, this is almost like The Hangover Part 3. There's, like, I'm not hungover, just still sort of impaired in this particular way that I think is not unrelated. Um, yeah. It's just kinda weird. But anyway, we're good though. We're really good. So we're in the interruptions and stressors for the fifth hub. And so yesterday, I read through the abuse of trust, and we're on page 197 if you're following along in the book. And and as with with yesterday, it's like there's really something important about the the kind of the gentleness, tenderness, and patience about addressing and contemplating and evaluating these particular, um, notions, there and I wanna say there this is back to the, reflex, emotion, and logic where, like, what we're doing right now is the contemplation of this, where we're consciously reclaiming these, um, these notions by evaluating them with our conscious mind, but, like, what we're doing with that is, like, getting to an aspect of the emotion around it, and then being able to actually work with the emotion of it. And so to be able to be activated and triggered and be able to build our capacity around having feeling with this, and then tracking it to where you feel it physically. So this is a really strong practice as far as like as if something arises here is like what's the emotion, and using the second hub practices for even like naming and tracing and finding the physical location of the feeling that is associated with the emotion. Because the pain of emotion, it's not just like an intellectual notion that's painful. You can feel it physically. And so it's like finding the physical feeling, finding its location and directing attention towards it and being able to stay with it and just stay with it as to the extent that you can, and to observe it and watch it and like give it like a place to be expressed. And the thing is, like, with that allowing that's been held back, it can be excruciating. And as mentioned before, it does over time dissipate. But to be gentle with yourself and have your tools for being able to buffer and even exit the sensation if it's becoming too overwhelming. Another thing I want to point to here is that this is very much a place to consider, like, what are the other resources to turn to in terms of, many folks this are like really awakened to the notion of wanting to talk to someone, like talk to a therapist. So, I really want to surface that this is like a big part of parinama is like inherently recognizing your value as a human being, and like your importance relative to like your worthiness and your extraordinariness, that the deservingness of having care teams and people that support the aspects of yourself in like all manner of how this is arising, and see and being remaining curious about that and open, and just being like, I think this is something that I need, and then allowing that and feeling the worth of it. So I haven't pre-read this, so I don't know what's going to come up, but we'll see. So I'm going to start reading here. So verbal abuse and bullying. So criticizing is a hard habit to break, and telling people they're not enough or explaining to them who they are, delivered as a so-called fact, is a terrible practice, especially if the words are intended to hurt. However, telling people how their behavior affects us and what you believe is possible for them can be part of the process of transformation. Mhm. And that really, I mean, like, that's pointing to the fact that, um, when like, criticism is, like, spoken from behind a wall of defense. Like, in what I'm talking about here is that the criticism that's, like, kind of levied across someone with, like, a high level of defensiveness of one's own infallibility. So it's like, "I'm in the position to levy this." Like, that's a really strong indicator that of, like, malevolence in the notion of life in, like, who's delivering it. So, it's like, if there's absolutely if like that if that nature is something to just watch out for, because a lot of time, like, in our interactions, we're looking for validation oftentimes, and so when this dynamic of someone who's telling us without any accountability of their role in the dynamic, it's a thing. That's a thing to just pay attention to. Um, yeah. I mean, look, there's yeah, okay. So sometimes critical attention is a necessary wake-up call, but when it's done by diminishing or degrading people, it can be destructive. You have every right to tell people how their behavior has affected you, but you have no right to tell people who they are. You have every right to enforce a personal boundary, but you do not have the right to tell someone who they are, for example, a bad person, because they invaded it. I mean, it's really hard to know. I mean, one of the things is that, like, I guess, the way I look at it is that the people who activate me are showing me something about myself, and that there is, like, an aspect of, like, presenting something. But like, the whole okay, scratch that, like, rewind, erase or rewind, whatever. I think the point here is to just tune in to awareness of, like, the invasiveness of our opinions of other people, like, and the flip side of that is, and so that's kind of like, "All right, well, what's that about?" The flip side is this living from the inside out, where we're really coming into ourselves and realizing that it's like that our self and our relationship with it, with who we are, is hmm, let's see. That everything where we're kind of triangulating, like bouncing ourselves off of other people's impressions of us, other people's notion of us, like where we're taking like all external validation, where people are telling us what we are, where it's like using that as a kind of thing to test against our own sense of what is true. And even like what we're like, where we're willing to like look at, expand, and even the things like what we need to defend against. But, like, looking at the like, what people are telling us is their contextualized concept of, like, of what we are relative to them, and we're taking that in also contextualized based off of our perceptions. So, with the importance here in terms of, like, developing our integrity really has to do with this, like, internalized felt sense of who we are and the feelings that, just in, like, the inner experience of being who and what you are, and that transmitting its own kind of thing. That is very, yeah, I don't have, like, I haven't thought about this recently, so it's like it's very sort of ephemeral the way I'm describing it. So I'm gonna keep reading, and I'm gonna see what's left, what scraps are left on this table. So, okay. So the bullies we encountered as kids on the playground hurt our feelings, and sometimes we adapted our personas, but there's simply no hurt greater than that caused by the cruel words of a parent. And I would even add a sibling in here, like in our little trust tree in the home. Um, it's interesting. I've mentioned this before. I'm surprised how I did not include siblings in a lot of this, where siblings are part of that kind of like core familial experience. So it's like part of the thing. Okay, so when our parents tell us who we are, we tend to believe them. So I interviewed Yvonne, who said that even though her father left when she was 10 years old, his kind words had made it possible for her to build her self-esteem as an adult after recovering from the verbal abuse she experienced from her mother. Quote, remembering my dad telling me at 5 and 6 years old how smart, kind, and generous I was has helped me as an adult to connect dots about my true nature and to heal. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, there's something it's kinda like I think one of the things that's coming up is that it's like the difference between cruel words used against someone without consideration for the interruption and the disruption and the harm they can cause versus like the positive versus negative words, like the notion of like restorative, like authentic, like kind observation of like really seeing somebody and saying like this is something I think I'm gonna address how something about this. So let's keep reading. And if I don't, then I'll speak to it. So the act of so-called setting people straight can be violence on self-image, especially while that self-image is forming. Accusations that tell people who they are or point out negative or sensitive characteristics can be especially distressing. And adaptations are inevitable when verbal abuse, such as yelling, demeaning, or intimidation, occur in the home. So, when there's bullying at home or at school, a child will have to learn to navigate the complex waters of difficult people, and an adaptive pattern will emerge, shrinking to hide or inflating and fighting back. The options on the farthest end of the spectrum are running away or becoming a bully, and somewhere in between, we stand up for ourselves. Yeah. I'm gonna reread that. I was kind of again quickly. So, when there's a bully in the home or at school, a child will have to learn to navigate the complex waters of difficult people, and an adaptive pattern will emerge, shrinking to hide or inflating and fighting back. The options on the farthest ends of the spectrum are running away or becoming a bully, and somewhere in between, we stand up for ourselves. So, the inclination to notice negative things about people can be consciously shifted into looking for positive ones. If you're going to look, why not focus on the good stuff? We can fine tune our compliments instead of asserting so called facts about who or what people are. Tell them how you experience them. Okay, yeah. So I do write about this. So you're so pretty becoming a first person experience is I admire and appreciate your style and beauty. Or you're a rock star becomes you inspire me with your charisma and bravery. The idea is to shift a subjective assessment to one that is oriented from your direct experience, not general, often impersonal platitudes stated as facts. It's more work. It's more work to express your observation of a person as relative to yourself. It's more vulnerable. It takes more work because you actually have to, instead of just going, yeah, I kind of like that, you have to kind of think about like, how does that affect me? So why do I like that? What is the thing about that that's like kind of nice to see? Like, and so there's also kind of like it's just like an opportunity to like, if you see someone doing something amazing, just go, "You're so pretty." It's fine. It's not I like, this isn't this is just talking about, like, how to level up in this particular, like, kind of vibe. And also one of the things about, um I'm actually gonna talk a little more to this. As far as so this thing about, like, looking for the good in people, um, as I was reading it, one of the first sort of thoughts that came to my like, that surfaced was like, "Is this some kind of, like, sort of, like, gilded bullshit? Is this just, like, now I'm, like, all I'm doing is, sort of forcing myself," like, that kind of thing where it's like, it's like, find the positive in this way that is, like, kinda like, oof. Um, and what I really mean here, or not what I really mean, like what I would intend to kind of, um, impart here is the power of seeing the good in someone in what I'd consider like a fairly neutral type of situation. This is, like if we're talking about like familial, like um, you know, historical, whatever, I'm gonna kind of park that. I'm just talking about, um, the like starting to bring attention to the like some of the offshoots of judgment and feeling like uncomfortable vulnerability and defensiveness, which is looking for weaknesses in people as a way of protection, is like that criticism. And and I'll talk about like on it, like really from even from a business standpoint, that like one of the, it's like something I came to realize, and it was like when I'd be doing like business development, it was always kind of, seen, it was, there are these like attributes that were, these kind of attributions to me in terms of my ability to like make things happen in this way that was kind of not fully understood. But part of that was that with folks that I was seeking to create partnerships with, is that I would very actively look for the things about them to be admired. So instead of this thing where it's like, it's like going to war and like looking for all the weaknesses, like this thing of like, it's like I'm looking for like their pain and their weaknesses and their this. And there's also like I'll say there is an assessment of that, of like where there's an opportunity to do something valuable that's going to like help alleviate things. But in terms of figuring out how to case somebody, and even when we're talking about like in the special installment video about like being able to clock people for the things that they crave, is instead of using those things against them, um really elevating them, like using that as like a way of like seeing the things about somebody and appreciating them and creating that kind of a connection with folks, which is yeah, it's like so odd to me that it's like so hard for that to be considered to be I don't know, like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and part of the thing is, like, that it's not, like, to reduce it at, like, I think this goes back to authenticity, is that it's like tapping into this thing where it's like, this is the kind of world, so I'll talk about, like, from my thing is, like, this is the world I wanna operate in, like, this is what feels like there's kind of a sense of this, like, integrity feeling of this is how I wanna be operating with people. So, it's not me casing someone for compliments, it's me connecting to something about the person that I think is, like, genuinely of interest and is, like, kind of like, I'm like, "Huh, wow, that's really cool." Like something where I'm looking to genuinely have admiration for the person. Because if it's just like nice things about the person, that has sort of a frequency to it that's sort of like, is what it is. But what I'm talking about, and like kind of how I can tap in, is I'm looking for something about the person that is like resonates with me, where I can, like, see it, and I'm like, "Yeah, that's the thing." Like, that's something I really like, that's something, like, that's a shared, like that's it, like, that's, like, a shared interest, a shared passion, a shared quality of something of value or whatever, and that type of connection. Um, because the thing about there's, like, really sort of a, like, very, like thin kind of thing where it's like complimenting people like in a way where it's like an attempt to be kind of like manipulative and gain favor and fawn versus kind of like a tapping into something. So that's a little nuance as well. I think this might be classified as the Hangover Part 3. I don't know. You tell me. Put an emoji of a cocktail if you think this has been like particularly incoherent. I'll take a heart if it's actually made sense. So anyway, yeah, I think I'm gonna wrap it up. There are two. That one wasn't that bad. I feel like the last one was kind of like like into like that felt like something I wanted to be really kind of gentle with. So these next two are really so the last two interruptions and stressors for this hub are secrets and dissonance. And then we also have shame and unspoken standards. And then we're going to get into the adaptations and holding patterns. It's really, I've got it. Yeah. Like one comment here is that this is really, really interesting. Like I will say, like the exploration of this and the consideration of it. And even right now, what's happening with me as I've mentioned before, is like I'm reading this, I'm doing this with you, and I'm processing this, and I'm in a practice actively, and I like watching what's kind of shifting and like how this how this works, and like taking like a new cycle on this to like really enrich my own honestly, like my own relationship with myself. It's nice. It's nice. Yeah. So, okay. So anyway, that's it for this. I'll stop now. So, okay. What do we got to say here? I guess I'll just say thank you. I'll say thank you for coming along and listening and hanging out. And I want to just kind of, just mention, I really appreciate any interaction here, any comments, the likes and stuff. I really do. I love it. It feels really nice. And yeah, I like it. I've got to say that right now it feels also like the like direct messages about responses to stuff that, if you don't want to share it here on the comments, which is super understandable. It's so perfect. I really love it. I really love it. I think that, yeah. My hope is, as previously expressed, is that this becomes more of a conversation. But I don't know. I really love this. I love I love doing this with you. I love that you are watching this. I love that you're experiencing this too, because I think it is impossible to be exposed to this without being impacted by it. I have yet to see anybody that can do that. Certainly myself included. Certainly the people that produced the book, who had no intention of being influenced, impacted, whatever. It's a thing. It's strong. I also want to, in that being said, give respect for that, like, and just to validate that, because I think one thing that tends to be like folks feel sort of alone in the sense that this is as evocative and strong as it is, and or like kind of like, is this just me? It's like, it's not just you. There's nobody yet that's been able to encounter this and not be pretty deeply affected by it. Like, it's either like deeply affected or kind of recoiling from it and recognizing that it's not the right time to be doing something that's of like this depth and potency, and certainly recognizing that before I even fully could appreciate and comprehend the extent of how deep this goes. So yeah, there it is. All right. I love you. I love you. I love you. And I will see you next time. And also, and like any comments, anything, just please, I will answer anything, and I welcome the opportunity to be helpful in any way possible. So, okay, till next time. Bye.